So it's 2 o'clock. Welcome at this session about promoting and integrating walking and cycling at urban and regional level. My name is Anita Stienstra from the province of Gelderland in the Netherlands, and I will moderate this session. Hope it will work now. Yes, there they are. Here are the session speakers. I will have a short introduction before everyone will start. And we will start this afternoon with Tessa Leferink. She works in the active travel team of employee-owned Dutch engineering consults Witteveen+Bos, with owned Dutch engineering consults with international offices in the UK and Singapore and others. Over the last 5 years, he has gained experience in designing, planning and researching attractive cycling infrastructure and intermodal travel in the Netherlands, England and Scotland. And she has worked on 3 regional cycling routes and is currently overseeing the development of a pedestrian model for the city of Rotterdam, works on public transport scheme for Utrecht region, and does stakeholder management for a large road infrastructure project near Amsterdam. Tessa, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks a lot. I'm just gonna try sharing my screen, let's see how that goes. I am getting a slight error this time, which I had earlier in the test session, but not half an hour ago.
And I want to ask the other speakers to leave the stage, please. So Tessa is only in the view.
Yes, so the sharing doesn't work right now. I know that I also shared my slides with Maria, who would possibly take over, she already mentioned, or I can try logging in again with another browser. So I'm not sure, Maria, if you're available to maybe get them up and running, that would be a good alternative. And otherwise, Anita, I'm happy to swap places with someone.
I will share your screen, Tessa, so that you can just let 1 second.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry for the delay, everyone. I'll just already start with a little introduction on what I'm going to tell you more about. Oh, maybe switch off your mic, Piero. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm going to introduce to you the topic of using GIS tooling. And for who doesn't know it, GIS is Geographic Information Systems. So pretty much any type of map program with more information on it, particularly to design and plan regional cycling routes. And I will first describe 2 different trends to you, and then I will really zoom into regional cycling routes and the way in which GIS can help. And so as Anita introduced, I work as a transport engineer and have been involved in 3 different regional cycling routes in the Netherlands the last few years. So it really comes from my personal experience with that. Thanks, Piero. Next slides. Yeah, so trend number 1. Next slide, please. So we are cycling further and faster, and on this slide you see a couple of snapshots from what's happening. You see the rise of sales in e-bikes, and well, it's there's really an EU-wide trend. And on the right corner you see that also during COVID we've been traveling more. So for instance, I myself undertook a journey that I usually always take by train by bike, which actually served me pretty well. And an image I like a lot is the one on the right top corner, where you see how over the last near a decade our use of e-bikes has changed. So rather than only using it for leisure time, we also use it more for commuting. So not only has the total kilometers traveled changed, but also the reason why. Next slide, please. And this is a good thing, because we need an alternative to the car. And the further we cycle and the faster we cycle, the more likely it is that the bike is going to be an attractive alternative to the car. Next slide, please. And there is still, however, space to increase further. So for instance, in England, when we see that 1 in 4 trips by car are currently below 1.5 miles or just over 2 kilometers, which, well, could, I would say, be changed for a walk or a cycle ride. And also in the Netherlands, where cycling is, of course, already very common, I would say there is still space to win. So for the distance of 5 to 10 kilometers, still over half of them are undertaken by car. And sure, that is quite a distance. It can be by bike, but well, it could be improved. Next slide, please. Because then we come to trend number 2. You can go to the next slide. And I don't think this really needs statistics, but we are really working more digital. Here you see one of the more recent project group meetings that we undertook with the project group for the cycle route between Deventer and Zutphen, 15 kilometers. As you see, quite a few people involved for such a meeting. And well, we pretty quickly, I think, got the hang of it. And it worked surprisingly well. Next slide. So that was the introduction to my main topic. How can we co-design regional cycling infrastructure effectively in the early design decision-making stages? So it's really working together to realize these routes. Next slide, please. And then I've kind of taken the liberty to answer the question, because I think that using GIS tooling, we can improve it. And well, why do we want to do this? So we've seen, yes, there's been a trend of cycling further, but this didn't happen magically. You probably know the phrase, build it and they will come. Because over the last decade, there have really been quite a lot of excellent examples of improving regional cycling infrastructure. So for instance, here you see example from the wayfinding solution in Belgium. We see even international collaborations for the Eurovelo routes, and also the Radsnelweg in Germany on the right. There's really quite a lot of things happening in the fields. Next slide. And this is really the same in the Netherlands. Because we've also here been developing more and more infrastructure, and well, there's even more to come. Next slide, please. How to realize these infrastructure. So I've tried to sort of map out the different phases that these processes go through, and it can really be roughly 3 to 5 years, say, to go from, okay, we want to connect city A with city B, and how are we going to make a route there? What is the exact route going to be? And then the final steps of really designing it on the level of what materialization, what type of junction, and well, of course, then actually realizing it and maintaining good cycling infrastructure. Next slide, please. This looks pretty straightforward, but this is more the reality. There's always going to be a lot of barriers, and it is a little bit more of a messy process than it might first seem. And well, I think one of the main reasons is that there's always a lot of stakeholders involved, and it's pretty difficult to keep everyone on the same information level and making sure that at the right moment in time, all the right information is there. Next slide, please. So how can digital co-creation tools help with this? So I'm going to share with you the 2 tools that we are using here, we've developed, but I think there's a plethora of other great tools out there. So really my main call to action here is experiment with them and just see to find out which suits your particular project best. Next slide, please. So one that we've been using the last 2 years is called the Fietspad Planner, or the Cycle Path Planner, I would say is the English translation. So far, we haven't used it abroad, but we hope to start using it in Belgium soon. And it's a GIS tool, and it's made available online for all people within the project group. So this is really only used by the professionals involved, and they can access it anytime or any place. So both, for instance, on site on a phone or a tablet, or at home, which is pretty handy nowadays. But also what I think is the beauty that it allows people to, for instance, internally at their municipality, then discuss with, say, the local manager who knows all about urban developments in the region, or an ecologist who can maybe share more information on where a bat nest is located, to be aware of for choosing the trajectory and things. Next slide, please. So a little bit more zoomed in what it can do. I don't want to discuss it in too much detail. But basically, the red lines is the trajectory of the route, which you can draw in live, like the administrator is able to do it like live in a session, and then automatically different highlights pop up. So for instance, is there a traffic light, or is this area already dedicated to something else. So for instance, a Natura 2000 area, those sort of things. And people can leave their comments, so everyone is on the same page within the project group. And of course, additional layers can be added whenever that's valuable. Maybe a last note on this, you can see the black squares. So that is the town planning plots, and that is proven really useful, because quite regularly for these bigger regional cycle routes, you might cross or create new routes which weren't there already, and then it's very convenient to know quickly which plots and thus plot owners you might need to talk with. Next slide, please. Yeah, just two very basic overviews of where we used it. So this is Den Bosch to Eindhoven, a route of 30 kilometers long with 6 different stakeholders involved. Next slide, please. And well, we've really used it for various moments, for example, here in Vught, where we had to decide between 5 different routes. And it was really handy to then in parallel work analog on paper and zoom in and out of the planner to check out how things are working. Next slide, please. The second tool that I would briefly like to show to you is called InBuild, or Your View in English, which we've used, we have a bit more experience with. We've used it over the last couple of 5 years or so. And this is really for online public participation, public consultation, where it's a very easy way to get a lot of input, really. So it's more for really, yeah, it's not only giving information, but picking up info. So again, people can leave comments on the map. Next slide, please. And as an example, you can see here the Kruijf Bridge. It's already on this slide too. Yeah, where we've developed a junction, a bridge, and then also the underpass for cyclists, which wasn't there yet. So combined with an example picture here that you can see of a bridge, a nearby bridge, the Buitenrustbrug. This was really for us very convenient way, and for the province who we made this, who we did this project for, to get a lot of inputs, which can always be quite difficult to engage clearly with the public. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I just want to show you this slide, the N339 in the province of Gelderland, so where Anita is working, where we've used it to ask the public about different route options for a cycling infrastructure, and also which section it could have. So to conclude with some lessons learned, next slide, please. Oh, sorry, yeah, you can skip this one. I thought I'll get a bit shorter, so I deleted some slides. Thanks, Piero. Yes, that one, perfect. So just 4 bullets. I guess the main thing is that it is not a silver bullet right away, GIS tooling. You will always need to mix it up with other co-creation tools, and yeah, finding the tool that just fits best in that process and for your bigger project. It's always very important to set a clear expectations and guidelines, especially for public participation. I think, as always, it needs to be very clear there what you will and will not be doing with all the feedback that you receive. And although a lot can be done with adding massive amounts of layers and information, you really want to keep it simple, because it should help for many different stakeholders who all have their own expertise. And yeah, it's good to keep that to keep it simple. And the final lesson learned here is that it's also really valuable for internal use. So if you can go to the next and final slide. Perfect. So that was my story, and I hope this has given you a little bit of a feeling of how both the trend in developing more regional routes and cycling further and faster, as well as developing or using and experimenting with all kinds of digital collaboration, can be useful for, well, the way that we develop a more cycle-friendly cities and regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but are there any questions to Tessa about this presentation? Otherwise, we will come back at the end of this hour of 4 presentations and have a discussion. So I don't see anything. Tessa, maybe I can ask you a question.
Sure.
What did you learn about what you don't expect at these tools? Can you take a...
In the development or in those projects, what we learned by using them?
In the development, I think.
What we mostly learned, I think, was the keeping it simple part. So I think as an engineer working with a lot of specialists here, we tend to feel like there's so much information, you want to share everything. But looking at the process and what the project needs, usually it's only a little bit of information that's already going to be very helpful. So it's doing less rather than more. I think that was really the main lesson that we learned when developing this.
Okay, yeah, clear. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks.
So we will go to the next presentation. And this is for Xavier Sanyer Matias. Xavier Sanyer is a civil engineer who completed his study at the Technical University of Catalonia. And since 2017, he is head of the Mobility Service and ATM Barcelona. And he also is responsible to evaluate the new urban developments in the metropolitan region of Barcelona from the point of view of the mobility. So, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Anita. Let's see if my screen is working. I think so, isn't it? You can see my screen, isn't it? Okay, I cannot hear you, but I assume that you can see. So thank you, POLIS, the organization, to invite us to explain our strategy in the future regarding the bicycle. First of all, let me tell you briefly who we are. The ATM is a consortium created in 1997, who is responsible for planning, infrastructure, and mobility, among other functions, in the metropolitan region of Barcelona. Our territorial scope is the Barcelona County, and we cover a population of 5.5 million of inhabitants. That it's about 75% of population of Catalonia. As I rationally mentioned, we plan the mobility in this area, so we are the team who coordinate and manage the mobility master plan in the metropolitan region that we have approved recently, last July, for the period 2020-2025, after a work of more than 2 years approximately. I go straight because I know that I don't have a lot of time. I go straight to the objectives of the plan because I'm sure that our diagnosis has a lot of in common with the problems that you are suffering in your regions and cities. So I'm not going to explain news for you. But what I want to explain is how we imagine our mobility model. And we have proposed 5 double objectives, and I will just mention those of them related to the active mobility and more focused on bikes. Our mobility must be sustainable and healthy, so the bike should have a key role as a transport mode in our region. We want an efficient and a productive mobility, and we consider the bike as a very affordable means of transport. Of course, it's cheaper if you walk, but then maybe you cannot reach some distance in a competitive time. Our mobility must be safe and reliable, and for this reason, we need a very important bike network to achieve this objective. And we propose as well an inclusive and equitable mobility pattern. I saw yesterday in one session a 96-year-old man from Netherlands who ride a bike daily. So age shouldn't be an excuse to ride a bike. Of course, I know there are some limitations, but we have to encourage all kinds of people to use it, no matter age, gender, procedence, or level of income. And finally, we want an intelligent and digital mobility. And I think that we have a lot of possibilities to digitalize vulnerable users and the network. I have seen that we are very aligned with Tessa in some works. And what can we do with this digitalization? Because we think that we can increase the safety of the users, and we can encourage the use of bikes as well. For example, creating a better experience in their trips. And how we pretend to achieve this objective with 10 areas or lines of action that you can see in this slide, which include 86 measures. I will not explain all of them because I don't have time, but just let me mention the structure of our program or plan. The areas develop the tools that we need for implement the whole plan. And the line number one, or the area number one, is the creation of a healthier mobility. This is the core of our plan. But of course, to develop this line number one, we need an adequate network that we design and we propose in the line or the area number two. Within this network, we have to provide the proper services of transport. This defined in the line number three. New means of transport or existing types of mobility which has increased during last years, for example, car sharing, e-scooters, mobility goods, are developed in lines number 4 and 5. To be competitive, we need to assure the accessibility in the economic areas, and we develop all these actions within the line or the area number 6. And finally, our mobility has to consider the energy transition, the co-responsibility of citizens and companies, and of course, we have to be innovative. And we develop all these measures in the lines number 7, 8, and 9. But you have seen that I have skipped the number 0, because this first area or line of action is the number 0, and we have named this way because we think this is very important. This is the backbone of allows us to implement the rest of measures. We need data, we need strong governance, we need a proper regulation, the tools for planning, and of course the digitalization. Sorry, with this word that I mentioned before. Because if we are successful implementing this first area, the line number 0, we can develop easily the rest of areas and measures. So for us, it's very, very, very important. And in the area number 1, we propose to develop actions to promote cycling, and we propose as well the creation of low emission zones in all cities of more than 50,000 inhabitants, where the bike will have a key role. Okay. In the area or line of action number 2, we propose a regional network creating links between main cities with a distance affordable by bike or electric bike. We already have a network, but now with the potential of electric bikes, I could see the increase of electric bikes that Tessa shared before, and we have detected as well this increase. Now, these kind of bikes are more popular than 7 years ago when we prepared the last plan and we designed the last network. So for this reason, we are expanding the network to consider the potential of the electric bikes. And of course, we plan the bicycle as well as a part of the trip. So we are spreading the network with safety parking bikes in railway stations. In other areas, we propose more measures. For example, we consider as well important to regulate bike sharing in the cities. If not, a positive action can create a negative impact in our cities. And for example, we want to encourage people to use bike to go to work. I will explain later how we work with companies to promote the use of bike in working days, and especially after the pandemics. But what we have noticed after the pandemic, that there is a high interest to use the bike. After analyzing mobility data since March, when the pandemic began, we have seen that the use of private transport has recovered much faster than public transport. During last week, the use of car in the metropolitan region, it's about 75% if we compare with a normal day one year ago. The use of public transport, it's about 55%. As you can see, it's lower than private car, but the positive thing is that the use of bike is about 85% if we compare with a normal day 1 year ago. So it's the means of transport who has highest level of recovery. And we have to set this number during the last weeks because we are in a partial lockdown. Well, we start again to the normality last week, but at the beginning of the academic course, we measure this same ratio, and the use of bike was 120% if we compare with a normal day. So we were very happy. And the interest of using bikes encouraged us to implement the measures that I have explained before within our mobility master plan. But we want as well to promote the use of bike during the process of the return to the new normality. Why? I'm arriving at the last slide, but let me explain you. We want to encourage people and companies to use bikes among other sustainable actions. After the pandemic, we detect that some people was afraid of using public transport because of a potential risk of contagion of corona. And at the same time, some companies advise their workers to avoid of using public transport. We were not happy with this situation. And for this reason, from the ATM, we have created a digital tool where companies can make self-testing about their mobility. And the digital tool proposes actions that minimize the risk of contagion of corona during the trips from home to the work, but at the same time promote a sustainable model of mobility, avoiding the use of private car, because we don't want that people leave the public transport and go to the private car. And we encourage people and workers to use public transport in an efficient way, avoiding, for example, the rush hour, but at the same time, we encourage people to use active models, and bikes can have a key role. You can check the tool. I don't have a lot of time. You can check the tool in the link you can find in this slide, mobilitat.corresponsable.cat, that it's co-responsible mobility. You will find a Catalan and a Spanish version of the tool. We don't create an English version because we assume that our companies can understand Catalan and Spanish, but we think that can be very useful in this return to the new normality. That's all I want to share with you. I don't know if I have on time. I will be very glad to answer some questions if you have, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Is there anyone who has a question? I see a question. What do you think is the main obstacle in implementation?
Well, I think that we have a change of behavior after the pandemic. At the beginning, I don't know if you know Barcelona and the whole area, we have a very high density. So the public space is very, I don't know how to say, everybody wants their part, cars, public transport, bikes. So when we have to fit a bike lane, it's very difficult for us because we have to steal the space to other means of transport. I think that this lack of space is very important. It's maybe the main obstacle. After the pandemic, people that value more the active mobility, I think that if we steal some part of the public space to other means of transport, people can understand more. And when we are implementing actions about active mobility, pedestrians and bikes, I think that we have less opposition of neighbors, of shops and economic issues. So I cannot tell you that we have solved all problems, but I think that we are going in the right way.
Okay, thank you very much for this time. So we go to the next presentation, and that's from Joost de Kruijf and Nathan Hooghof. Yes, there they are. Joost is a principal investigator in the field of cycling behavior research at Breda University of Applied Science, and his ambition is to not only to acquire new knowledge, but also to share his knowledge with the upcoming professionals in the field, hereby strengthening the connection between research, education, and the relevant fields of activity. And Nathan is his co-presenter and works at the Province of Noord-Brabant in the Netherlands and several cycling highways and cycling policy. Floor is yours. Go ahead. Oh, Xavier, would you leave the stage, please?
Okay. Ja. Yes. Okay. Even kijken. Sharing. Application window. Share. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joost de Kruijf. Next to me is Nathan Hooghof. Hi. Welcome. We are going to present really briefly feeding future cycling network planning, and our hopes are to inspire you, giving some examples from our practice to future cycle network planning, and also on behalf of the Brabantstad partners, we welcome you to this presentation. First thing where we start off normally is when we talk about cycle planning, we make a distinction between the cycle path, the bicycle, and the cyclists, and of course the environment, because there are so many different people cycling who do not regard themselves all as cyclists, but they are pedaling on a certain purpose to their destination. So when we talk about cycling and planning cycling, we always make a distinction between the three types. And what you see here is Little Red Riding Hood, together with our State Secretary of Infrastructure and Water Management, and Alderman of the Municipality of Loon op Zand. And they are cycling on one of the most famous cycle highways in the Netherlands, the cycle highway between Tilburg and Waalwijk. What we are going to talk about is how we use data-driven insights for cycle policy planning.
Yes. As you said, that was for the province of Noord-Brabant. As you can see, it's in the south of the Netherlands. As you can see, some facts and figures here. We have 4 regions. And as Joost already told, we are in behalf of the Brabantstad partners, which are the 5 largest cities in Brabant, the province, and BYCS, where Joost works for. Well, you can see some facts and figures, but maybe it's good to just go on to the next slide.
Yep.
And with these partners, we have a program, the Samenwerkingsagenda, in which we have 6 items which we want to accomplish. We want the optimization of the bicycle network. We plan a lot of different bicycle highways, which one of you saw just before. Behavioral change and safety, because of course you can plan what you want, but people have to use it as well. The mobility chain, of course, very important. The cycling is very good until like 15 kilometers. But when you need to cycle to get further, you need a good chain for the longer distances. We use knowledge and innovation for doing that. So we try to keep up with all the innovation. Joost is a big partner in this, but of course there's more parties which can do that. Marketing, communication, collaboration. Well, as Brabantstad partners, we can do it as cities alone, as a province alone, but it's better to just do it together. We have a marketing campaign, a communication campaign, it's called Chase. And with that, we try to collaborate and to get a nice marketing item here. Mm-hmm. And of course, last but certainly not least, data monitoring evaluation. We try to plan data-driven, so we need a lot of data. We have a lot of data, and with the tools we developed, we can optimize our network, we can change behavior, etc., and we can monitor it. And with that cycle, we can also evaluate everything we have done.
Yeah, and one of the things we should mention with the agenda being built by the region is that there are so many specialists in the field of cycling. And for foreigners, it's maybe new, but because we have so many people cycling and so many cycle specialists, it's sometimes really difficult who does what and what does contribute to the whole effect of people cycling more in each day. So, for example, we have the Ovenring. It's a really high standard, or the optimum standard cycle infrastructure. But at the same time, convincing people to cycle more in the Netherlands is a challenge, to say, because they are used to taking the bike. So going from good to great, we have to have a specific part on the agenda doing that. And with these 6 items, we try to develop the whole cycling share to a next standard. And if we then look at only shortly to the region, a lot of people live in the close vicinity of the big cities in the Netherlands. So the network in the region we are working in is so dense that there is a lot of opportunity for cycling. And for your understanding, the red lines are the e-bike opportunities, but with that we cater, I think, for 80% of all inhabitants in the region.
Yeah, that's just the 5 largest cities. Of course, you have the middle-sized region, so I think well, most of the province can be cycled within 15 kilometers.
Yeah, and with that having said, the interesting part is where should we invest in cycling? Because that's the main important thing for the region. Where do we build the high quality, high standard cycle path? Because we say if it's not safe, people will not start to cycle. So one of the basics is safe cycling infrastructure. And what you see on the map is the connection between the city of Tilburg and the city of Waalwijk in the same cycle highway corridor as we saw on the picture with Little Red Riding Hood. And what we actually did, and that is even, and that's a nice thing to mention, this evaluation scheme has been uptaken by the ministry just since I think a week or two. And with this we can show the travel time gain, and that's the right hand side of the picture, the travel time gain due to the cycle highway investment. So what you then see is in minutes the gain of all cyclists. So with the construction of the cycle highway, people are 5 to 10 minutes faster going from A to B, and that's massive. And with that, we try to calculate the amount of extra cyclists between the origin and destination. So short picture again from the cycle highway, Nathan.
Yeah, of course, as a province, you want to know where to invest. I mean, we have only a small amount of money, so you want to know where can we invest best in cycle highways. And this tool really helped us to pick some routes which are really good to go. This is our new ambition map with a few lines. The red lines are the cycle highways which are realized or in planning to be realized. And of course, we have also a wishing list, which are the brown and the brown dotted lines. And this is really the map for cyclists we want to achieve in a few years. But this map is constructed with the help of the potential scan, so we know with this map these are the best routes to invest in.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that the data-driven insight was input for the dialogue from the region with the cities and the small municipalities, where not only the data-driven insight in the amount of cyclists was used, but also the eagerness of municipalities to step in and join and co-finance the
that's what the role the province has in relation to the municipalities. We like something to be done, but if municipalities are not that eager, well, maybe then we should do it later on.
Yeah, so I think that's massive, and that's the important thing for now also, that the tooling is not the objective itself, but it's input for the sound dialogue. This is a picture we would really like to show, because the next step we are taking now is building a digi-twin, so a digital twin of the city. So the map you closing down. But what we are doing now is making the connection to the railway stations to optimize the chain between cycling and the public transport too. This we skip, and then I think we came to the end, Anita.
Well, I think also with the tools you can plan bicycle routes, but you can also plan your cities according to the bicycle routes, so you can also do the other way around.
Yeah.
Joost and Nathan, thank you very much for this presentation. I see one question already. What is your ambition in terms of commuters switching from car to bike and electric bike in the next few years?
Our ambition is, we want a model shift. In Brabant is already a model split of about 25%, and we want to gain it to 30%.
And the interesting part is, but I don't have to tell you that, Anita, is that we are in the national program of enhancing cycling. So I think with all the knowledge developed in the region of Gelderland, but also in Brabant, it's adding to the national standard of going up to, I think, 27% of cycling share.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you very much for this presentation and questions. Oh, I see another question. How have you been working together with other regions' density and weighing potential busy routes more favorable?
Notes are two.
I've been working together with other regions to expand these highways over the borders.
Yeah, I think one of the things Tessa, because she's also in the chat, Tessa, we were partner with Gelderland in the CHIPS consortium, so we took our knowledge into the European context already. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we have the CHIPS project and where we collaborate, and we are both part in the National Tour de Force network, which tries to enhance cycling on a national scale. And the last question is, does the potential scanner include population density? Yes, it does, together with cycle speed, and that's an important thing to add. So we stepped away from the cycling distance and moved on to cycling speed, where we also can interact with project as talking bikes, where the communication between the bicycle and the traffic lights are optimized. So it's with that optimizing the cycle network, we can show also the extra amount of cyclists.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, for the expansion of highways across the borders, we also worked together with our neighboring provinces, and the tooling we use is also a little bit above the province bordering, so we can use it also. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I want to go to the next presentation because of the time. Thank you very much, Nathan and Joost. Next presentation is from Marco Mulder. So join in. Yes, thank you. Be welcome.
Yes.
Marco is a senior transport planner with extensive experience in various aspects of transport planning in the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, and Turkey. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anita. Hello, everyone. As Anita said, I'm Marco Mulder. I'm a senior transport planner at ARUP Amsterdam. And today I'd like to give you a brief insight in the work that we have been doing in Ankara, where we delivered, together with my colleagues in our offices in Dublin and Istanbul, in fact, a cycle strategy framework, and are in the process of delivering a cycle master plan. I'd like to start off with a bit of background to the project. So it's part of a wider scheme called the Future Cities Program. It is funded more specifically by the Foreign Commonwealth Office. And the aim of the program is to remove barriers to economic growth, promote economic reform and development. It has targeted 19 cities in 10 countries, and ARUP is responsible for delivering projects in 3 Turkish cities. And the one I want to focus on is Ankara, because that's the project I've been working on. The other 2 cities are Istanbul and Bursa. And the idea behind the program is that whatever is delivered in the project will be delivered together with the end client, and in this case, that's the Ankara Metropolitan Municipality. A bit of an overview of what that entails in terms of well, how big they are, really. So the Ankara Metropolitan Municipality covers a pretty significant area, as you can see on the map on the right. We decided, because of the sheer magnitude of the area, to focus on the urban core, which is the area in red. And it still covers an area of about 40 kilometers from east to west. And we are supposed to deliver this in the period between December of 2019, so we're a bit over a year underway, and the summer of next year. So a bit more about the city. Obviously, you probably know that Ankara is the capital city of Turkey. It has about 5.5 million inhabitants and is projected to grow to 10 million inhabitants by 2030. The old core is in the east, shown here, and it's a bit hilly. And the city has expanded towards the west, where you have relatively flat plains, and there's a lot of different type of neighborhoods. That's also due to the fact that there's a lot of different type of employment, because of, for instance, ministries and stuff like that. So you see informal settlements, but also upper middle income areas. And an image to kind of clarify what I'm telling about is this one. So here you can see Ankara Castle in the middle with the flag. It's easily recognizable, and in front you see a little more upstandard housing, and on the right hand side you see a bit more informal housing, and you see the hills obviously as well. Then a bit about the transport context of the city. So Ankara is relatively car dependent, or road-based transport dependent, I'd say. It has the highest share of cars per 1,000 inhabitants in Turkey. And you also see that there's a lot of road-based public transport. You see here the bus and the minibus cover about 35% of the share, and they all use road space. And that's why you can also see that the average daily travel time is quite high, even though the length of the trip might not be that long. And you also see that rail, it has a metro system, actually has a relatively low share, even though it's there. So that kind of translates into images like this. It's a very bad image, but it does show that people park everywhere, even on sidewalks, and that's also due to the fact that, for instance, there is no regulated parking in Ankara. So what did we do? The cycle strategy framework basically talked about all of these, let's say, current state of affairs, and we ended up with a few constraints that are listed here, one of which I've talked about before, the unregulated on-street parking. Another one I'd like to point out is the reputation of cycling. So we've carried out a survey among 9,000 respondents, and they actually see the bike as a children's toy or a leisure activity, and not as a mode of transport or as something that should be part of the daily urban mobility system. So our approach was this. I briefly mentioned it in the beginning. So we have delivered the cycle strategy framework, in which we have come up with a few guiding principles that lead us through the master plan. And the master plan basically addresses the gaps that we have identified in the cycle strategy framework in terms of constraints, and it also talks about where we can seize opportunities that might have arisen from that work. So a little bit about the three guiding principles. We have developed those around basically the conditions you need for cycling. So you need infrastructure, obviously, for everyone to be able to use. And I say everyone quite specifically because it's not just for the fit and daring, but it should be for everyone, as mentioned before. Even the 97-year-old should be able to cycle. You also need to have access to a bike. Not everybody is able to buy one, and then the awareness needs to be there as well, not only in terms of awareness among other road users, but also in terms of regulation and reputation. So a quick reminder, the aim of the program that our client had was to remove barriers to economic growth and promote economic reform and development. And we think that becoming more inclusive in transport or cycling will contribute to removing these barriers. I'm almost there, Anita. So these these guiding principles then are translated, are manifested into a list of goals and subsequent objectives. You can see the goals here, and one of the goals is infrastructure, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that because that's where we used inclusivity with these underrepresented groups in the back of our heads. And these are basically the ingredients we used to come up with a network that is then geared towards these underrepresented groups. And how did we do that? Just to give you an example, we looked at socioeconomic data, and that socioeconomic data informed us, okay, these are the areas where people with low income live and where they actually work, and how do we connect from their living places to their employment places. And obviously then selecting the primary routes as the last step was based on the 5 needs of cyclists. And that resulted in a beautiful network that you can see here. Obviously it doesn't cover everything, but Ankara is very big, so it's a first step. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marco, for this presentation. I've already one question in the chat for you. In the Netherlands, we measure less cyclists when the temperature is above 40 degrees. How is that in Ankara?
When the temperature is above 40 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the current cycle share is already quite low. It's 0.1%. So it's practically nothing. So I assume that people will probably not cycle in summer that much, because it's very hot. That's one of the things that is a challenge for the future. But so are the winters, because the winters are very cold in Ankara.
And when, maybe you told it, but I missed it. When is the cycling plan going to be realized?
So we've almost finalized the master plan, and the municipality has now even driven all of the routes. So it's almost finished, and implementation will start from 2021 and then onwards. So we start off with a pilot project. And that's next year, and then after that we start implementing over the course of 20 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries, thank you.
People do. Then we have time to discuss all the presentations we just got. So were there any questions left? I see a new question. How did you plan the engagement with underrepresented groups? I think it's for you, Marco.
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's mostly done by my colleagues in Turkey, and it's done digitally now as we speak. Because of COVID, the original idea was to have that in summertime, but obviously COVID kind of made things change. So we did it afterwards, also in discussion with our client, and planned it digitally. Yeah, unfortunate, but yeah.
A question left. Does the potential scanner include population density? That was for Joost, I think. Joost, can you come in?
Hi, Anita. I think I already explained it a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We.
Or how you, maybe the question, how you deal with the borders. Can you?
Yeah, the interesting part is that we also in the CHIPS project developed the European cycle highway potential map, and we had really limited amounts of data there. And I always say we can build such potential scan for the whole of Europe at once with limited, and the further down you go in the planning process where more detail is demanded, you can improve and enhance your insight in the potential. So I think we are really rich in the Netherlands with data, so we can go really deep down, but also as Marco already presented, we are in the luxurious circumstance that we do not have a hilly or mountainous area. So one of the things we encounter going abroad is the incorporating all the height differences, and then I think one of the things we could add is the impact of the e-bike, especially because there the effort is increasing. And as Tess asked, do you weigh it with busy routes are more favorable? I think we can show route choices and route alternatives, but that's something different than the potential. Where some people think you can build a cycle highway from Amsterdam to Rome, we have proven that the density is so low that you can maybe optimize some change in the whole route, but not build a cycle highway like this highway maps for cars.
Maybe can I add something, Anita, if that's okay? Just to link into what Joost was saying about gradients. That was one of the issues we had in Ankara as well, because some of the parts are very hilly and some of the parts are not at all, and we didn't have any data for that either. So what we did, we used two data sets, so a road map and a topography map, and overlaid them over each other in what Tessa was talking about, GIS tooling. We overlaid them in GIS and then calculated for each and every single segment of road what the height difference was, and then on that basis we kind of guessed what the gradient would be. So that's what we used for that, and might be interesting for the European stuff to use that type of analysis as well. Quite quick and dirty.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for this tip. I see another question at the chat. What role can wayfinding play in encouraging more walking and cycling journeys, and at which stage of the planning process, if any, should it be considered? Who of you would answer that question?
Well, I'm happy to give my thoughts on it. I wouldn't say I'm per se an expert, but just from experience with different wayfinding systems. So this really depends, I would say, on both the country and the province. So, for instance, the province of Noord-Brabant, as well, of course, the partner of Joost can tell us probably more about. There's really quite a lot of testing going on with wayfinding systems, and then it's a clearly defined thing for a province, and then also clear on the regional and the local level. However, that's not always the case. And well, in that case, I would say try to collaborate on a larger scale because you are planning regional cycling infrastructure. So you do want it to be understandable for the end user, because this is really why you do wayfinding, for the end user, to make it more accessible. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, maybe we can add to that. Because in the Netherlands, we have two different systems for wayfinding. Of course, you have the natural wayfinding, but taking that out of the discussion, we have a wayfinding system for recreational cycling and for utilitarian cycling. And both groups demand different level of information. So which role can wayfinding play? I think a lot of people cycle for recreational purposes in the Netherlands, and the system developed there is really suiting the target group. And just recently, a study was finished or completed on a new wayfinding system on cycle highways, because there the speeds increase, and so the wayfinding systems were a bit outdated. So I think with the improvement of the wayfinding, there are less barriers to start cycling, but for the experienced cycling, there's always the question to what extent they need the wayfinding. But having the two in parallel encourages as well the utilitarian as well as the recreational cyclists, and I think that's important as a distinction in this discussion.
Yeah, but I think also in research or planning process, if you build your cycling path, it looks natural to just know the route. I think that's you should also do that. I mean, you need some wayfinding, but your own infrastructure is the best wayfinding you can get, I think.
Any more questions? Please use the chat for some questions. Give you some time. We have still minutes left for the break. Break is at 15:15.
Can I otherwise maybe ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Excellent. Yeah, Javier, I'm really curious with the program that you're rolling out now. So the timeline is 2025, if I understood correctly. So what is your hope that the first biggest step will be in the next year?
Well, or regarding the whole plan?
The whole plan.
Well, the whole plan, I think that the most challenging thing that we have to face is that when we design or we work in the plan, we didn't consider the effect of the pandemic. So we have approved the plan in July, but everything has changed. And for this reason, for example, we create this tool that I explained at the end of my presentation, that digital tool, because last winter, it was like, I don't know how to say, but a general idea that we have to work against the climate change, the air quality, blah, 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 all these things, no? We had Greta Thunberg here in Spain, in Madrid, blah. Everybody, we have to do it. And right now, companies, citizens are worried about the health of people, the risk of contagion, wherever. And what we think is that people don't want to use the public transport because they are afraid of the public transport, and we have to fight against this situation. And we didn't think about this before the pandemic, so we have to readjust. We don't have to forget that the climate change and the air quality, and of course physical activity, equality of opportunities between citizens, all these things have to be included, not just the risk of contagion, that of course is the most important thing right now, no? So we are trying to adjust our ideas to this new situation, and maybe this is the most challenging thing that we have to face. But even this situation, for example, we have implemented the low emission zones during 2020. In the middle of the lockdown, Barcelona, because it's the area of the low emission zones, has affected the whole region, but implement the low emission zones. We move until September, because in the middle of March was the day that we start with people have to pay fines. And we decided we already implement. We are very happy because the level of NOx have descended. So we are doing things, but we have to readjust.
Okay, yeah, but it sounds like the pandemic in a way then kickstarted some parts of your pilot. Like I can imagine it's easier to start a zero emission zone when car use is low, although you might then get the debates, oh, they're only pushing their agenda right now because it's so easy. Yeah. Like I can imagine that's debate, or what happened there?
Yeah, for example, we have created a new bus lane in the north corridor of the city in a highway, and it was a bus lane that well, not us, the regional government, but we are part of them. But it was a bus lane that it was in discussion several times, and we have to expand the highway or wherever. It was very, very expensive. And now, with the descent of the traffic, we didn't expand the highway, and we delete one lane, and we have created this lane. So now cars, they have one less lane to enter to the city, and we have created in a very cheap way this new bus lane. So we get profit in this new situation that we have less cars to make faster and cheaper some action. So there are some good points, but for us, and especially from the ATM, that we are responsible for the financial system of the public transport, we are very worried because we have a very level of occupancy, as I shared before, 50-55%, and for our budget, it's a drama. So we need to increase the level of occupancy, and well, there are some positive points and some negative points.
Of course, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for answering. Yes, so we have about 5 to 7 minutes left to the break. So is there any other question or something to bring into discussion? Maybe. Otherwise, I will thank these presenters, and for now, maybe we will come back after the break and in the last discussion. Then we go to the break, and I will see you back at 3/4 after 3, and I will see you then. So welcome back at the session of promoting and integrating walking and cycling at urban and regional level. We have already had 4 nice presentations, and we will finish with the last 3 presentations. But before that, I will lead you through the housekeeping rules if you missed this and entered later at the session. So, oh, excuse me, this slide, I would talk to you. If you had any questions during the presentations, please use the chat and then go to sessions. And maybe there are any polls, then go to the polls and then to session. And when viewing who's attending this session, go to people and then session. And if you want to maximize the screen, you can hide the chat or double click on the presentation or on the speaker. And after the session, you can try the networking function and visit the exhibition area. So I said we had already had 4 speakers, and we left with the 3. And next speaker is Lucas Snaije from Bikes. And Lucas manages communication strategy and leads community building efforts in the American region for Bikes, an Amsterdam-based social enterprise promoting cycling in cities around the world. So, Lucas, you're in, and get the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Anita. I will now attempt to share my screen. Can you see my screen? I will assume you do. So this talk will focus on a somewhat niche topic of human infrastructure, as the title suggests, that we believe deserves more attention from policy and could really support the great work that is being done by planners in cities across the world to make their communities and their cities and their urban environments more bike-friendly. So at Bikes, we work mainly at the level of civil society. So we coordinate a network of activists and advocates internationally, and then we work locally with governments such as the province of Gelderland to develop youth programs and other behavioral change initiatives related to cycling. And so this has enabled us to really grasp the particularities of cycling adoption from a grassroots perspective. And it has really focused on engaging new urban dwellers that may not see the bicycle as within reach for a multitude of reasons, such as economic, gender, safety, culture, practicality, you name it. And so I'd like to start just by reading you a short quote from the mayor of Tirana that really, I think, encapsulates quite well what I'm going to be talking about, which is, I often joke that the biggest infrastructure project to change in the city is not a boulevard or a big building. We know how to do those. It's the 10 centimeters between your ears that is the biggest challenge. And so, you know, of course, while infrastructure is absolutely essential and a really key factor in you know, accomplishing modal shifts towards cycling, support for the development of a culture of cycling is really important for it to succeed. And so we see a need to kind of break silos between the urban planning centric hard factors and the softer sociocultural elements that really shape movement through the city. So if we look kind of at the current paradigm around cycling-driven change, it's still very much reliant on this build it and they will come model or bicycle-oriented development, which is absolutely true. Once again, connected, safe infrastructure is essential. But we think that there's also the potential to kind of move beyond this and really strengthen it, because it can fail to account for habits, norms, perceptions, and also the specific kind of demographic needs in a specific city that were kind of alluded by Marco from ARUP just before the break. And this can be related to questions like, does one see the bicycle as a viable option for trips to work or to the supermarket? Does one feel safe on a bicycle at rush hour, at night, or when being with a young child? Does one even know how to ride a bicycle, and is a bicycle affordable for a particular population demographic, for example? And so these are issues that slow down the uptake of cycling, especially for vulnerable groups, and are still essentially largely misunderstood, under-researched, and deprioritized both in advocacy circles, but also at the policy level. And so thinking about these questions can make cycling more inclusive and so more widespread. And so just to show you, this is kind of a conceptual model developed by a group of researchers from McGill University in Canada that really shows how attitudes, habits, socio-social environmental factors, and perceptions are integral aspects of travel behavior. And so the question now is to look into what are the most effective methodologies to capture and analyze these factors, and then how can these findings be turned into effective public policy? So what do I mean by human infrastructure? It's a term that is borrowed from the urban anthropologist in Los Angeles, Adonia Lugo, that examines the role of culture and social networks and how we relate to our environments. And so in this case, how we perceive mobility habits. Applying this framework to European cities, for example, would involve the strengthening and or development of new policies destined to reinforce the social fabric of cycling, which is essentially to normalize cycling for daily trips. A stronger human infrastructure of cycling in a city would lead to people positively reinforcing each other's desire to cycle through intrinsic motivation. It would be a society that cycles because it's fun, comfortable, healthy, practical, social, and environmentally friendly. We think it's particularly important right now because we are kind of at a crossroads. We've all witnessed this bicycle boom that was kind of triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, that has led to some really positive changes in our cityscapes and kind of a boom in modal shifts, but that doesn't indicate a cultural shift once confidence in public transit systems are established, or if people kind of start buying cars and use that as kind of the default protective equipment when moving through the city. So to take into account these factors, we think we need to kind of make cycling policies more inclusive. And so, this can go from gender-aware cycling policy to larger integration of youth perspectives in cycling, but also thinking about different uses of cycling, such as kind of livelihood cyclists or cycling for the elderly. Those kind of strategies that can help remediate these specific needs and factors can help ingrain this culture of cycling and develop what kind of has been called a habitus of cycling in the city. And so to define these soft factors, we've kind of grouped them into 4 broad categories for the purposes of, well, this talk, but also for this kind of very preliminary research that we started conducting at Bikes. And that is nudge tactics and incentives, awareness and education, ephemeral interventions, and knowledge networks. And I'm going to kind of jump into those really briefly. We don't have much time. Nudge tactics and incentives would be kind of the very highly successful e-bike subsidy programs that we've witnessed, well, both in the Netherlands, in Sweden, also in the UK, and in other cities across Europe. But there are also kind of gamification initiatives. In Belgium, there have been some really successful ones, but also bike-to-work schemes that were kind of alluded by the fellow panelist from the city of Barcelona. And that just kind of shows there are several behavioral change strategies that can complement the development of a cycling kind of network to get people cycling in the city. Awareness and education, that's kind of self-explanatory, but for new people to use infrastructure, they need to have the right knowledge and also motivation. And so disseminating information regarding the benefits of cycling to different groups is really important. Cycling practices into school curriculums to get the next generation ready to cycle, developing effective marketing campaigns for commuters, and also just the support of community groups that work locally to enact change are really key to kind of cement this culture of the bicycle in both current and future generations. Ephemeral interventions is the next one. It's a really broad one, so I'll kind of make it really short and simplified, but kind of the development of open streets and car-free days, but also slow streets and school streets, and finally looking at this form of urbanism that we can kind of define as flexible and agile. So really looking at temporary initiatives that both show cities' commitment to promoting safe and active transport while also enabling a broader public to try cycling in safe conditions. For example, the pop-up bike lanes that we've seen have been a really wonderful, cost-effective and impactful measure that can show citizens what the future cycling city could look like. And so using kind of this iterative process in urbanism, also beyond the crisis, can be a tool to both understand the population's reaction to these changes and engage them further in this iterative process that we've been witnessing as really effective. Sharing best practices is kind of part of this knowledge network that is the final bucket of kind of the softer factors to incentivize cycling that we've defined. And those are really, really important. And really here we want to kind of cement both kind of the engagement with the public sector, but also nonprofits, residents, and even businesses that have been working to incentivize cycling in their communities. And so this really can enable us to kind of define best practices, develop regional exchange to kind of create this culture of cycling that is so important to be kind of developed alongside cycling networks. So we've started developing a toolkit, and this will be kind of ongoing over the next year. But you know, overall, what we're seeing is that there are a number of interventions that lie outside the changes to the built environment that can really support the uptake of cycling. And so what I want to kind of emphasize here is that we need to remember the emotional angle to incentivize cycling, and that if we combine kind of transformations in our urban form with kind of a change in our culture of daily mobility, then we really think that a paradigm shift can take place. Of course, this will require funding, research, and further knowledge exchange. And you know, as I've just mentioned, we've begun conducting some research, and hopefully we'll be working with municipalities and community groups around Europe, but also on other continents to kind of shape best practices and outcomes of such strategies and develop some kind of policy recommendations. So this is really kind of a desire to bring human infrastructure and this concept of really kind of culture of cycling to the mainstream. And so I hope, you know, we can get some great feedback from kind of different cities and different stakeholders. And yeah, that's about it for me. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Lucas. Good in time. Thank you for that. Is there any question? Please use the chat. Didn't see anything till now. Otherwise, then we go to the next presentation. Thank you, Lucas, for sharing your knowledge. And next presenter is Silvia Basenghi. Welcome, Silvia. Silvia Basenghi was born in Italy, and she's an architect graduated at Venice University. And she lived and worked for 6 years in Paris, and now she's back in Italy and working as a mobility planner. Here you are. Success.
Okay, thank you, Anita. I'm going to share my presentation. Here we are. You can see it. I think so. Okay, let's start. So thank you, Anita, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm very glad to be here to present you the work we've done in the last month, in particular how we tackle the emergency with cycling in the metropolitan city of Bologna. I would like to start showing you the localization of the metropolitan city of Bologna in the northeast of Italy at an important crossroad of transport and communication. As you can see in the middle of the slide, the Metropolitan City of Bologna is a local public authority with policy and institutional competence in the whole metropolitan territory of Bologna that include 55 municipalities for whom we play an assistance and coordination role. On the 27th of November 2019, we adopt the Metropolitan SAMP. It is the first in Italy at the metropolitan scale and was conceived together with the capital city. The SAMP is a clear statement of our policies for energetic and environmental sustainability of transport for the metropolitan area. In the SAMP, cycling represents a key element. It is the center of the SAMP strategies, whose main goal is to drastically reduce the use of private cars and to improve the quality of city life. As you can see in the green circle, the SAMP goal is to bring the bicycle modal shift from 5 to 14% over the metropolitan area. That represents an increase of about 240,000 units made by bicycle in daily journeys. When COVID-19 arrived in February, we had just approved our SAMP. So we had a clear path to follow and a clear goals to achieve in terms of sustainable mobility. And we quickly understood that the COVID could have represent a driving force through which not only to continue our reasoning, but to speed them up. Here you can see a scenario elaborated in April in our mobility office. What would have happened if public transportation would be used at 50% of its capacity? The answer was very easy. Private cars would have regained urban and street space, mostly in the central area. So, in order to overcome this problem, together with the capital city of Bologna, we choose to focus on a bike-centered strategy with two main targets. First, to promote an important cultural transition by shifting the focus from the technical planning of a metropolitan bike plan to the communication of a Bicipolitana, an informative map of a cycle network. Second, to implement the infrastructure in the central area by designing cycling connection between the capital city and the central area, based on the SAMP Metropolitan Bike Plan. This connection, together with the realization of the cycle path already planned for 2020, anticipate the SAMP scenario and develop the bike network in order to overcome the risk of congestion shown before. The Bicipolitana represents the final and communicative application of the SAMP's Metropolitan Bike Plan. Here you can see the map and the logo elaborated and shared during the lockdown. The strategic line represents the 10 radial connection between the capital city and the surrounding territory. Currently, the 31% of this infrastructure has been completed. For the Metropolitan City of Bologna, the Bicipolitana map isn't only an informative map, but also a metropolitan strategy to overcome future challenges by promoting and implementing sustainable mobility. We also supported an advertising campaign promoting cycling instead of car, realized by influential local association that you can see in the yellow rectangle, and that it says, install the antivirus, choose a bike. There was other advertising like that. This slide shows the cycle connection of the central area, in yellow in the map. These approximately 20 kilometers of intervention are based on the SAMP Metropolitan Bike Plan, and their goal is to provide the absent connection and to mend the cycle network of the central area. Presently, the 12 executive projects are ready to start. The principal intervention are bike lane and mixing zone, or bike boxes, cycle crossing and cycle roundabouts. But we don't call them pop-up lanes or temporary lanes. They have been designed to stay because of their relation to the SAMP and to the 10 Bicipolitanas radial lines. This intervention, together with the site under construction already planned, allow for an incremental implementation of a metropolitan bike network of approximately 147 kilometers. Here you can see the number and the data of the work in progress related to strategies. As you can see, this works allows for the implementation of about 25% of strategic line. It is an evidence that planning has played a fundamental role in the responsiveness of a public body. The objectives defined in the SAMP and shared with institutions, stakeholders, citizens, and associations allowed us to have a clear direction to overcome the physical distances imposed by the COVID pandemic, and at the same time, not to lose the sustainability goals and action planned by the SAMP. However, Even if in July the Italian government disposed national resources, I'm talking about 5 million euro for the entire territory of Bologna, the funds aren't yet available. To address this issue, we advance significant sum to start the most critical intervention, mostly in the capital city of Bologna. But this shows a very important point. In order to meet the needs of the territories and citizens, planning needs to be shared with central resources. In order to react quickly to a rapidly changing scenario, it is mandatory that central resources and their provision stay in touch with citizens and their needs. So, to conclude, thanks to a long-term strategy and planning, the Metropolitan City of Bologna and the City of Bologna were able to react immediately to COVID pandemic and didn't need an emergency plan because the solution was already there. So we hope now to start very soon the main part of our intervention that are designed and ready to be realized. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's see if there is some questions.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Oh, I see an upcoming question. Interesting presentation. I was wondering, how did you arrive at the target mode? You mentioned from 5 to 40%. And another question for the bicycle, did you also come up with quality design standards for these studied routes of? Is that a part of?
Okay, the second question includes the second answer includes the first one. The first one includes the second one because how to arrive to 14%? There are a lot of strategies that we are on which we are working. Firstly, to develop the infrastructures. Of course, we are hardly work on this because our infrastructure is on the metropolitan territories, on the entire metropolitan territories. So along the main suburban roads, and it isn't already constructed. So we are hardly working on this primarily, but in parallel and at the same time, we are working on a significant signal and wayfinding development in order to have an homogeneous signals and comprehension of the bike network on the entire territories. There are also parallel activities like develop bike parking, velo station, work together with the school to reorganize school streets. And of course, we are working strictly together with the City of Bologna in order to promote a communication campaign that includes advertising campaign, mostly of the things that that Lucas shown before. So work with people, with students, with children in a bike to work connection. Activities or temporary activity and tactical urbanism. It is a whole strategies that includes, of course, the two main subjects that are infrastructure and wayfinding. So for the second question, quality design standards. Yes, we are working on it because of we have a large territory to coordinate. So we are working on standard design to be accepted into the network of a Bicipolitana. The municipalities and the project needs to be to reach some standards quality. but we are developing.
Thank you
It
very
is
much.
in progress.
It's in, but developing. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Anita.
Yes, that were the questions. Maybe in the discussion some more, but for now, thank you for the presentation. And I will go to the last presentation, and that's from Job Spoelstra. Coming in, please. Yes, there, yes. Nice to have you. Job is an innovation manager for IT system integrator Technolution and responsible for R&D activities and partnerships in the fields of smart mobility and energy. Floor is yours.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. And I'll share my screen as well, as we all have done. So thanks for the session for so far. And the Congress altogether, of course, and great to welcome all Polish friends in my living room for a change. So today I want to talk to you about reliably measuring and improving cycling in a multimodal urban environment. I'll do that with a case that we've done in the city of Groningen, where we've performed this. So the baseline is we have the least amount of data on the largest share of urban mobility users. And this is the case for most European cities that we have, which can be understood as traffic management legacy, which we've known was primarily focused on vehicles, which are quite easy to sense and also more easy to guide through the city center. And cyclists and pedestrian had to find their way in between them, and each for itself. And I want to share with you how I think that's changing, and a case that we've done in Groningen to actually use reliable data on real-time cycling and walking in a city and use it for the best of these users. So I'll take the example of the city of Groningen, which is in urban mobility terms quite a success story, I must say. A city center that's largely closed off for vehicles and quite a significant shared space where cyclists and pedestrians share the space there quite significantly. And it's a lively and livable city, and which is incorporated in their theme of wanted to become the living room of the region. But really, they've become so successful that the amount of pedestrians and cyclists there are becoming too crowded sometimes, which give users a feeling of discomfort and letting them feel unsafe. So there was quite a challenge to deviate from this large success. And of course, you want to avoid people leaving their bicycle at home as they find it too uncomfortable in the city center. So the city of Groningen started a pilot site in the city center, where they asked organizations to help them in finding what's the urban mobility with regard to cyclists and pedestrians, and what can we do. So what's the reason for this feeling unsafe and feeling uncomfortable, and how to solve these issues. So what's going on and how to solve it. Well, our approach in this pilot was a sensor that we've designed, which is called FlowCube, which enables the counts, travel times of cyclists and pedestrians, and the decision for their routing within the city center. It's quite a small sensor, as I've shown in a second, with quite some computer capabilities on board and running on artificial intelligence capabilities and 4G internet. And with this sensor, we're able to detect these three categories over a multitude of different modalities, so cyclists, pedestrians, but also scooters, cars, trucks, what have you. And the main topic, so we have quite some sensors in that field, but the main topic of our sensor is we have put privacy first and functionality second. And normally this is the other way around. Doesn't say that functionality is all gone, but privacy was the first start of the design. And it's quite complex to tell you within this session, but the FlowCube does not store any images. And processes all it sees within the camera and does not transmit any person relatable information. And we've done successful impact assessments for GDPR within the city of Groningen and Rotterdam, and quite some to follow next. So this is a picture, I hope you can see it. This is a picture of a flow queue before the central station of Rotterdam. You might recall it from the 2016 conference. And it's the white square that you can see. As you can see, it's quite a subtle, small sensor, which shows I am just an ordinary, another traffic sensor, and I'm not an enforcement camera, for example, watching you 24/7, which is really isn't. And this is what it looks like in the public eye. Well, in short, what it's how it works, the optical sensor transmits its image locally on the device to the computer, where it's translated to a digital hash, so which cannot be translated back to the person that the sensor saw. These hashes are then sent to the local cloud. And within this cloud, all these hashes come in from different flow cubes around the city. And here we can see, can we match these hashes and see what has the travel time become of this person between different points. We can never translate it back to a specific person. And what we can do with this system is provide insights, real-time and historic on these modalities, send information to digital signs to guide them through the city center. And we're now working on use cases on reconfiguring traffic lights to better guide cyclists, for example, at intersections. So this is an overview of what the dashboard looks like, with some modal split information, some travel time information, and I'll just want to go with you through an exercise on how does this information help you to understand what's going on in the city. So over a stretch of 300 meters in the city center of Groningen, we have a graph of average travel time for a cyclist over the hours of the day on average. And my question to you is, at what time in the day will the average travel time for cyclists be highest? Well, my initial response was they will be highest during rush hour, as it's most busy in these hours, both for cyclists and pedestrians in the shared space. But when we look at the data, it's the other way around. During rush hour, the travel times are lower, and in the afternoon, these travel times are higher, which was a surprise to us. But then again, you can say during rush hour, cyclists will probably cycle faster as they're in a rush, so therefore these travel times are lower. But when you dive into the average travel time of these cyclists through different days in a week, you get a whole different picture, because here you see that the travel time is quite constant all through the week at whichever point in the day you take. But one day stands out, and that's the Saturday, which really deviates from the rest. So then it's the reason, then it's the question, what's happening on a Saturday that's not happening on any other days? And then if you dive into the pedestrian account data, which we can deviate from the cyclist, you see that on Saturday there are way more pedestrians in the shared space than on other days, and this shows that the cyclist might run into these pedestrians, or at least have to avoid them, and therefore their travel time reduces. So expands, I must say. So this shows that if you only have a fragment of the data, you might get to a different conclusion than if you have more detailed information also on different spots of the day, which might give you a more broader view of what's going on. And you can use this in actually adapting infrastructure, real-time or historic. So this was data based on 5 different flow cubes, and we're now there are now 20 of them in the field of Groningen, and also some in the city of Rotterdam. And here we can learn, so what information does this bring us with regard to these locations with routes in between them? So we have 20 routes using 24/7 monitoring on multiple directions in one flow cube, and we can deviate between these different modalities quite reliably. And we're also doing use cases based on more crowd monitoring, based on the social distancing measures in the light of COVID that we've taken. And even with the COVID measures in place, we can see that over the past 7 days in Groningen, we saw more than 1.2 million people passing the flow cubes within the city of Groningen. So that's quite significant. You can understand what insights come from them. So some use cases that we're working on and that really might come to mind with this information. One is predicting these crowds. So when you saw these people coming into the city center, you still have 30 minutes time to take precautionary measures in case that these crowds get too large and might be unsafe. A use case that we're working on is, can you reroute traffic on real-time basis? So can you use this information to reconfigure green times at the traffic lights at intersections to better guide cyclists and pedestrians through the city instead of primarily focus on guiding these vehicles? And in more static way, you can use this historic data to make longer-term adjustments to your infrastructure based on this evidence, based on this data. So how do people flow through my city, and what adjustments can I make to better guide them through my city? So in short, as with regard to the flow cube, quite reliable data on cyclists, pedestrians, and all other modalities that I've talked about, live, and also mapping them historically, so you get an overview over time. The data is based on is owned by the local authority using the system, and it really creates a true multimodal insight that we haven't seen before in traffic management. So thank you very much. That's my presentation, and for any questions, please pop in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Job. You've already a question from Peter de Haan. He asked, do the students have not a rush hour or a different rush hour?
Indeed, a very interesting one, and indeed these are the kinds of use cases that you can solve. I must say my student time is a bit is quite some years ago, but still I didn't have any rush hour, so you might be very right. And these are the kinds of use cases you can really dive into. We cannot see students against all other modalities, of course, but you can understand how they guide through the city and see around university buildings what's the mobility pattern in between these buildings, for example. So very interesting questions indeed.
Yes, and a question from Tessa. Are there limitations to where you can place this job flow? Flow cube, sorry.
the job flow, that's a nice question.
Yeah.
I think there are, but we still haven't reached them. So one of the points that we're looking into is a really very crowded density. So really like, as we know in the Netherlands, King Day, if it really gets so crowded, do we still have a reliable evaluation of the outcomes? We haven't had such a day, also due to COVID, of course, but this is quite an interesting use case. For now, we've seen that the measures that we do are over 95, 96, 97% accuracy, and also the matching from these different persons is very accurate. And this is different than other technologies usually use. So for example, a radar detection is quite often used for these kinds of cases, but here you see that one person is quite reliable, two is reliable, 3 persons passing by is already quite vague. So is this one person, is it 3, it might be 10. You cannot really tell from radar technology, for example. So that's really one of the use cases why we started out on the FlowCube.
Other question, can this device measure speed?
Yeah, it can. One of the use cases that we're working on now is using it for recreational, so sport recreational purposes in public domain, where we want to deviate between someone walking, someone running, and someone skating, for example. So you get an understanding of what is this public space used for different purposes, without actually, as I said, actually tracking the person as a conventional camera would, but still getting a sense of these different modalities and try to see how specific can you go without getting it all mixed up between the different modalities. But indeed, we get a sense of speed, and we get information on which direction they're taking, and this information we also use for creating the route network, so understand where do people go in between these different flow cubes, for example.
Okay, and the next question, can you connect devices in the chain, thus recognizing a particular person on several parts of town and calculating speed?
Yeah. So that's indeed a good question, and that's the main setup of the flow cube. So we cannot. For example, we can see that someone wearing a yellow jacket and a blue trousers, and having a child seat on the back of their bicycle. This combination of optical characteristics we see in another location, and this is then translated through this hash sign. So this digital hash that you cannot get back to a specific person. But indeed, by using these different flow cubes locations and trying to connect these different dots, we can understand, so what is the travel time in between these locations, and also a modal split of which routes do cyclists take in this shared space, for example.
Okay, last question from one who knows Groningen very well. Will you reroute the Fokkingenstraat?
I will most certainly ask. So for now, I'm streaming from my hometown of Rotterdam, which due to COVID measures, I'm not allowed or not advised to go to Groningen. But really, I cannot wait to go back there and see the system in operation again. And indeed, we're doing a lot there, also in Rotterdam and in other cities, to use these different use cases and get a sense of what's going on and all the different potential opportunities that arise from that point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you very much.
Then we go to the general. If there are any questions left, then please use the chat. I thought there was one question about the first presentation. I don't remember. We'll have a look. No. Yes. The toolkit. The toolkit of Lucas. Maybe you can all come to the stage, please. Then we can have a discussion. Lucas, your toolkit. Has it a large or small towns in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the partial benefit of working on kind of the cultural development of cycling is that these softer factors can be applied to any city scale with a lot of ease. If you take the example of school curriculums, but also kind of taking a gender lens on cycling, that means that the kind of different factors that will be incorporated into your strategy will be able to kind of scale from a very small city to a large city. So absolutely.
Thank you for that. I will have a look at the chat. Come on.
Maybe Anita, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Given your view on all these different sessions, what are your takeaways from the different presentations that you've seen?
That we'll do at the wrap up on the end of this session.
Okay, very good.
But maybe I can start with it because I don't see any new questions in the chat. If you have some, be my guest, please. Then we will take it. I saw a lot of nice presentations. Thank you for your presentations, all of you, even the one before the break. And we have saw some tools from Brabant, from Groningen, from a cycle planner and InView. And we have some plannings, city plans from Ankara, Bologna and Barcelona. So I think there was a lot of information to wrap up. And yes, it's difficult to say what I will take away, what was good for me, because I have to do a lot of things this afternoon in the rule of the moderator. But I think there was a lot of inspiration in your sessions, and yeah, thank you for that. I see a new question for Lucas. Oh, you
I
already answered.
I think it was
Okay.
worthy of
You're
of a
very
simple
fast.
nod.
Okay. And another question to Job. Could the flow cube help us to see the way behavior changes after introducing shared space as a concept?
Yeah, it could, given that you have measured before the actual implementation of the shared space, which is not the case in Groningen. But for example, one of the very interesting phases that we saw is the start of the COVID measures in Groningen, where you can, of course, on Dutch national television, sometimes data is shown on mobility patterns and do people still align with working at home and what's going on regarding vehicle traffic and congestion, and we can see the same patterns in mobility behavior and stuff like that in the city center of Groningen, where you also see so the day that the COVID measures started out, you can see a very large drop in all different ways. And then sometimes the measures were enlightened a bit and reduced again, and you can see all these patterns in the data in how people use cycling and walking against also logistics patterns, as of course restaurants and retail might be closed for some time. So you see different amounts of logistics vehicles, for example, popping into this shared space when they're allowed to. So you really see over time, if you map this well and show this, really know what you're looking for in this historic data, you can really show a lot of patterns and have a long-term development. Indeed, the change of behavior or some other societal developments and mapping that in your data, indeed.
Very much. I see a new question for all speakers. What would be your key recommendations to other cities which would like to promote walking and cycling in their urban areas? What do you think are the most useful tools and strategies to do so? So who wants to answer that question?
So maybe I have a suggestion. One thing that will be, I think, obvious to you, but might not be so obvious to my colleagues and other people in the IT system world, is do not forget about unconnected mobility users, as a lot of times these people walking and cycling don't use a navigation app, don't use their vehicle, are unconnected, and therefore sometimes it's assumed that they you cannot see them, so why care? I always use the example of my grandmother going outside. She doesn't have a smartphone, so how will you know she's there? And I think that's, I think within the POLIS community, this is a very obvious one, but it always surprises me how difficult this message is to bring to technical and IT people around the place.
It's true. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to build on what Joop was saying, this panel would encapsulate essentially kind of my main recommendation, which would be to take a really kind of holistic lens on cycling. There's some really great work being done kind of on the cutting edge of technology and data gathering, and there's also kind of a need to do the really nitty-gritty stakeholder engagement at the street level and really engage with various communities that don't take part in the traditional town hall model. So really going to the communities and understanding their needs. And I think having this holistic approach to cycling. And then in terms of the tools and strategies, very much in the similar way, I think that using both the kind of most the lowest tech approaches to engaging, as inclusively as possible, because I think that in the current perceptions of who a cyclist is in urban centers, it's still very much, and we see this even more beyond Europe, either you're a kind of wealthy inner city young urban professional, traditionally seen as white, male, comfortable on the road, or you're a livelihood cyclist. And I think broadening that definition of what a person on a bicycle is in the city will help tremendously engage people that might not see it as something for them in the city, but that has a myriad of opportunities, you know, whether you're a mother or a father taking a kid to school, someone who wants to travel to work, but transport is expensive, all of those kind of different groups that could really benefit from the many effects that cycling can confer on an individual and on society.
So by my side, I agree with Jaap and Lucas, of course, and I can add some strategy maybe. So planning, for example, it was the point of my presentation, and maybe if is it possible having a strategy on a large scale and on a large territories, and include the most of territory you can. So involve stakeholder and actors, like Lucas just said, communication, and also have an user experience eye to conceive the bicycle path, but also wayfinding and all the system and tools that they have to find on their path. And work on a shared space and on shared streets, because I think that this is the very point of change in behavior, to understand that the streets are for all, and if you give space to bicycle and to pedestrians, that change a lot the perception of safety and of bicycle and the comfort of bicycle and of walk.
Thank you, Silvia, for this recommending. So, is there any other question? As some of you mentioned, space is an scarce resource in cities. Have you faced any barriers in trying to reallocate space for walking and cycling, and how have you dealt with this resistance? Silvia, you first?
Yes, of course. This is in Italy. This is one of a big problem, because of our cities have historical center with limited spaces. And during years, of course, it has been occupied by cars and by parking. So it is from years that we try to remove space from cars to people. So how we do that? Because every time there is some polemics, and newspapers are there are plenty and many comment. People are very angry, and also in social network and social media. So how to overcome this problem? Of course, with participation. So to involve citizens and municipality also, because also the political part, it has often it is often not really ready to take this step. And so participation, explanation, communication, and education to show how we are taking this decision, and then to show it practically. So doing it in a street, in a first street where we can have an example and practice it, so the citizen can practice, can understand what is a 30 zone, can understand what is it a mixing spaces, and then comprehend the positive the positive strategies and the positive No, I can find the
positive parts of it. I think the positive parts.
Yeah, of course, the positive part of the project.
Yeah, of course. So good. Thank you, Lucas or Job.
I would just add, I think Silvia's answer was, but a great example to look at, which is actually in a United States context. So obviously is the city of Oakland. They rolled out a really extensive network of slow streets where essentially they closed 10% of their neighborhood streets to just spaces for walking and cycling. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of outraged car drivers. And they took a really iterative approach and a very agile approach at making those changes to reach kind of a middle ground where everybody was happy and understood the positive effects of that strategy. And I just think that these types of kind of very temporary activations that are super low budget, I think the city transportation program was $150,000, which is improvement project is not a lot, and they're really now seeing positive results from that and have adjusted 74 kilometers of their city for cycling and walking through this very iterative process. And so I would say that that is a really good way at making people understand what the project is for, and also to kind of reduce that friction that can happen if you make really radical changes overnight.
Yep, just short.
If I may interpret space, not really as space in public space, but maybe space in a green time in an intersection. We're involved in quite some projects and with quite some clients in reconfiguring these traffic lights and making them cooperate. And then I see a lot of times that the objective at the start of the project are very much also have a room for these cyclists and pedestrians, and in the end it's all difficult to sense and difficult to guide, and in general a lot of these configurations are still mainly how to best guide the car, and the remaining green time can be deviated between the different cyclists, and I'm still in the course of understanding why that's the case. I think a lot of technical difficulties are there, but I just find it fascinating. I hope that we can still, together with the Polish community, push back against these developments, or at least help these authorities to keep up these objectives.
Let's do so. I see a new question. Because of COVID, some of the lo-fi traditional engagement and consultation techniques are harder to do. How do we ensure they do not lose their meaningfulness compared to the flashy high-tech digital transformation we are now seeing? Just a short reaction, because we are almost run out of time.
I find it a fascinating question. My view is that especially the lo-fi engagement and consulting strategies, giving these pop-up bike lanes and stuff like that, successful in a short amount of time, and a lot of these technical developments are even sometimes they're the fastest, but for now they're quite slow. So I just see success in these very simple changes of this public space.
True.
In terms of engagement, I think there is still the possibility to go and see stakeholders where they are and where they live, and that's actually bringing us forward to a lot of the problematic nature of how government has engaged with citizens. The traditional town hall model include people that work during certain hours, that have the time to go to these kind of public participation sessions. And so I think when you see groups going to where people live, so doing in parks or in neighborhood community centers, that can still be done on a much smaller scale and obviously socially distanced. Of course, when cities go under total lockdown, that is when kind of these what you're calling high-tech digital actions can take place. Once again, a combination of both is really important. Both kind of grassroots stakeholder engagement on curbsides at intersections in neighborhood parks to circumvent those issues of digitization and kind of non-inclusivity in public engagement, while also kind of using kind of social media and all of these other tools to understand what stakeholders in this.
Okay, thank you very much. I would wrap up because of about 2 minutes we have to leave. It's time. So I will thank to all the presentators and thank you for the attention the listeners did and the questions you asked. We have seen some nice tools to implement when you are planning in the cities for pedestrians and for cyclists. So thank you for your knowledge, thank you for your attention, and maybe see you next time. Bye-bye.